We've traveled over 43 countries, and if there's one bucket list experience you have to do at least once in your life, it's this. Seeing Japan's cherry blossoms in full bloom is pure magic, but they only last a few days, so timing is everything. In this video, we'll show you exactly when and where to go, the best cherry blossom spots in Tokyo, Kyoto, and Mount Fuji, plus how to skip the crowds and book a stress-free vacation. Before we dive in, we're Giselle and Steven, also known as the Lover's Passport, and we're gonna be taking you on a new bucket list adventure every single week of 2025. If you guys love to travel, make sure to hit that like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our bucket list recommendations. Now, with that, let's dive into the video. So when is the best time to go see the cherry blossoms in Japan? We would recommend going anywhere from March 10th until about April 20th. The cherry blossoms have a full cycle where it takes them around 2 weeks to go from blossoming to having the incredible cherry blossoms to all of the petals falling off and then the trees turning to just regular green trees. Because the cool thing about cherry blossoms is you get to see Japan, which is this amazing, beautiful winter destination where all the trees are dead, and then all of a sudden these trees breathe life and the Japan turns into this beautiful pink glowing area. And we're not only going to be talking about cherry blossoms in this video, we're also going to mention plum blossoms as well, which are similar to cherry blossoms, just more of a purpley pink rather than a really nice bright pink. Another thing to keep in mind is similar to fall colors on the East Coast, where it starts at the very north and works its way down. It kind of works like that in Japan too, where it starts at one end of the island and is going to make its way up north, where the south is going to turn way quicker than the stuff all the way up in north based on what the weather's like. For instance, the earliest cherry blossoms typically start in like late January, but that's only gonna happen in Okinawa, and it's gonna last all the way through May, where the last cherry blossoms are gonna fall off in Hokkaido. So with that, we're gonna break down the 4 stages of cherry blossoms now. The first stage is called keika, and this is basically where all of the flowers start to bud. This typically lasts anywhere from 3 to 4 days, and it's where you'll see all of the blank tree branches start to have little buds on them that will eventually turn into these beautiful cherry blossoms. The second stage is the most famous one. This is called mankai, and this is basically when all of the blossoms turn into these beautiful flowers, and this happens over 4 to 7 days. And it's really interesting because if you look at a tree, typically some parts of the tree will bloom faster than others, just because of how cold it gets. For instance, the areas on the edge and the top will typically bloom faster than the stuff closer to the middle or the bottom of the tree. Step number 3 is called fubuki, and some people call this Sakura fubuki because it basically looks like instead of snow, it's snowing these beautiful pink petals. And this can also be a magical time. Especially, we went to this one area that we're going to talk about later in the video. The plum blossoms were all over the floor, so it gave it this really magical look rather than just having all of the leaves on the trees, because that's typically what you see. So this third stage can still be magical. It's going to last anywhere from 7 to 10 days for the tree to go from completely full bloom until all of the leaves are on the floor. And the fourth stage of this bloom process is called hazakura, and this is basically when all of the beautiful pink flowers are going to turn into green leaves. And this typically is anywhere from 10 to 14 days after the first bud. So you can see the full cycle of the cherry blossom. And that's really helpful for you to know, because when we went, we spent around 7 days in Tokyo. So we were only really able to see a little bit of change. But if you are planning a 10 to 14 day vacation, if you are in an area like, let's say, Mount Fuji, and the trees don't look like they are completely bloomed yet, you can just wait a few days and then you can start to track, okay, it's been 3 days, all of the buds should start to appear, because it's pretty magical. It literally will go from one day, you can see some of the buds, to a day or two later, there's these beautiful pink flowers. So just because you get to a location and it does not have the beautiful pink flowers everywhere, that is okay, because they will probably show up in a few days. So that is the full life cycle. Now let's start jumping into where the best places to see the cherry blossoms are in Japan. Now these are all the places that we would recommend, but if you really want to have the best experience visiting the cherry blossoms, we would recommend booking your trip on Klook, and they are the sponsor of today's video. In celebration of cherry blossom season, Klook is giving an extra 50% off anyone that books an activity or a tour in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. This is only gonna last from from March 1st until March 31st of 2025. Not only that, but you're gonna get an extra 10% off your activity when you book on Klook using our promo code. So you can get up to 60% off if you're gonna be chasing the cherry blossoms down below. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you exactly how easy it is to book Klook. So this is what Klook looks like. All I have to do is type in cherry blossoms in Japan and look at all of these different pieces that pop up. They have Yogi Park, Asukiyama Park. Look at these beautiful cherry blossoms. I can go and do a perfect day trip from Seoul. If you're traveling anywhere in South Korea, you can do Kyoto, Arishiyama Bamboo Forest half-day tour. That's exactly what we were recommending. You can do a full day tour in Tokyo. And look at this, it's $83 right now, but with our 50% off, plus if you use the promo code down below, you get an extra 10% off. Then you can go ahead and get this for way cheaper. We'll go ahead and put our favorite links for Kyoto, Mount Fuji, and Tokyo down below from Klook to make it even easier. All you have to do is scan the QR code right here to get 50% off your bookings. And once again, thanks to Klook for sponsoring this video. They made it so much easier to experience this once in a lifetime trip.
Before we get too deep into the video, I do want to put a pronunciation disclaimer in there, as we do with a lot of our foreign country guides, because we do not speak Japanese. We will try our best to pronounce everything correctly to the best of our ability. Just know we are all human and we make mistakes. So let's get into it. So there are tons of really beautiful viewing spots for cherry blossoms around Tokyo. And this year in 2025, it's looking like March 29th to around April 6th is gonna be peak cherry blossom season. But each year that obviously changes. It's very similar to fall colors where you have different windows based on different weather conditions. So in Tokyo for 2025, that's the dates to look out for. So first up is Ueno Park. This is probably the most famous viewing area for cherry blossoms in Tokyo. There are over 700 trees to view here throughout the park, so you'll definitely want to check this one out. Next up is Shinjuku Gyoen. It's only about a 10-minute walk from Shinjuku Station, so it's very easy to get to using public transport. And in total, there's over 68 different varieties of Sakura available, and they bloom at different times. So this area will give you a little more flexibility based on when you're visiting. So if you're before peak or after peak, you'll probably have a little bit of luck here if you're not right on time. Now, the most picturesque viewing area for Sakura in Tokyo is probably this one. Shidorego Fuji Park is absolutely stunning. This is the famous cherry blossom area where there's beautiful rivers, people out on boats, and the cherry blossoms are just full and over the river. It's extremely beautiful, and it's also extremely crowded because it is one of the best spots to go. If you are going cherry blossom hunting in this area, make sure to go early or later in the day instead of going midday. Next up is the Meguro River. This area has over 800 cherry blossom trees over a gorgeous concrete canal. So if you're walking around the area, this isn't as much as some of the other locations where you can sit and enjoy and like picnic around the area. This is more for like walking by and snapping some photos instead of spending the whole day to enjoy out here, but it is also one of the most picturesque cherry blossom viewing locations in Tokyo. Now, there's a ton of other spots that you can go, but those are probably the top favorites in Tokyo. We also enjoyed visiting and seeing the cherry blossoms over by the Ibara Shrine and the Sensoji Temple. There were some nice ones over there. But keep in mind, not all of the blossoms will be blooming at the exact same time. So while you might get lucky in some of the areas, the other spots in Tokyo might not be the exact same blooming time.
Before we dive into one of our favorite places in all of Japan, we just want to remind you about our travel newsletter. It's called Passport Pals. If you guys love to travel, you want the best points and miles deals, you want the best locations and areas to go, and just updates and tips when it comes to travel, all you have to do is scan the QR code right over here and we'll send you the link to join our free Passport Pals newsletter. Now, there are 8 things that we're gonna go over pretty quickly of things that we think you need to see in Kyoto. So the first spot is going to be Arashiyama Bamboo Forest. I'm sure that you guys have seen photos and pictures of this. It is one of the most beautiful areas right next to Kyoto. I would recommend going early or late just because it can get very crowded during the day, but we were able to capture one of our favorite pictures from Japan at this area. Next up is Fushimi Inari Shrine. This is just a beautiful piece of architecture we would definitely recommend going and checking out. And you can do this during the midday or later afternoon because that's when it's the most bustling and really fun to see the culture and the diversity of this area in Kyoto. Another thing to do in Kyoto, if you love embracing the culture of Japan, is a geisha tea ceremony. We did one and it was so much fun to see the full experience. We talk a lot more in depth about that in our full ultimate guide to Japan. So if you want to see that, we'll go ahead and put the link for it right down below. The next spot is called Kiyomiza Dera, and this spot was incredible, especially during sunset. So that is the time that we would recommend to go. There were cherry blossoms, gives you the beautiful view of the city. And if you guys are a photographer, I would definitely recommend bringing a nice zoom lens so you can capture some really unique angles of the temples. A nice little day trip from Kyoto is also an area called Nara Park. This is the famous spot where all of the deer will come and bow to you. Now, little forewarning, the deer can be a little aggressive. If you have any food at all, they will come up and hit you, they will headbutt you, they will chase you down, and honestly, it can be a little bit frightening. So I would only recommend doing this if you love animals. If you don't really like the deer coming up to you, would not recommend it. I know earlier in the video we talked about the plum blossoms. This is where you're going to want to visit the Suzuka Forest. This area was absolutely magical and was honestly one of our highlights of the whole trip, because during this trip we were a little bit early to visit the cherry blossoms, so we saw a ton of plum blossoms, which are basically the same, like I said, as cherry blossoms, just a little bit different color, and they typically come 1 to 2 weeks prior to all of the cherry blossoms turning. So when we went to Suzuka Forest, there were tons of them on the floor. It was so beautiful to see. Another spot that we personally didn't get to go, but that we have heard is stunning when it comes to the cherry blossoms, is the Philosopher's Path. So if you guys are in the area and you want to add another thing to your checklist, especially if the cherry blossoms are in full bloom while you're in Kyoto, I would definitely add that to your list. And the last spot that we would definitely recommend checking out is Yazaka Shrine. Really unique spot. You don't have to spend a ton of time here, but if you like architecture, you have to check it out in Kyoto.
Next, let's get into cherry blossom viewing locations around the famous Mount Fuji, and this area was my personal favorite to go and chase the beautiful flowers. First up are the cherry blossoms around the Chirito Pagoda. This is by far the most famous spot in this area for cherry blossoms. You're gonna get a beautiful view of the temple, and if you're lucky, you can also see Mount Fuji in the background. Now, keep in mind, Fuji is known for being a little stubborn when it comes to visibility, very similar to like the Matterhorn in Switzerland, where the clouds cover it pretty often, so you do have to play a little bit of luck when it comes to the weather here, but the Chirito Pagoda is just an absolutely breathtaking view. It's a short hike from the train station and it's super accessible. Make sure if you're going, we'd actually recommend shooting it at sunrise for the best time, but that's also a very busy time to go and shoot for a lot of photographers. So if you're not a photographer and you just want to take in the beautiful sights of the Chirito Pagoda, then I'd recommend doing it early in the morning right after sunrise so all those photographers have left. Next up, another one of our favorite spots for viewing cherry blossoms was Lake Kawaguchi. There's a lot of really good walkways around the lake, and if you're staying in one of the famous hotels along Lake Kawaguchi too, you can get some really beautiful views of both cherry blossoms and Mount Fuji, similar to the Chirito Pagoda at sunrise. We would recommend staying a night or two around this area. We stayed about 3 days in Mount Fuji, and it was really nice to be able to experience Lake Kawaguchi in the morning without having to take all the transportation to get out to Mount Fuji in the same morning, since the trains don't run before sunrise. Next, in the same Mount Fuji area, you can also go check out Oishi Park. This is a really stunning area. It's a really nice like afternoon walk. We liked going over here for around sunset time, and it was a lot less busy than in the middle of the day. And lastly, kind of out of the way between like Tokyo, Kyoto, and Mount Fuji is Kanagawa. We took a day trip here to go see the cherry blossoms. It was one of my favorite days that we did in Japan. So once we got to Kanagawa, we went to Nishihirabataki Park. This area was super cool. It had a lot of like little food stalls. There was a little roller coaster type thing that you could take down. And it wasn't just cherry blossoms. So this really cool stark contrast of both cherry blossoms and also all these beautiful yellow flowers everywhere. So it was a unique experience compared to the other locations on this list where it was just strictly blossoms. This one you had a nice variety and a lot of color. So let's go over a few things on what to expect during cherry blossom season and also some of the cultural things that tie in with this special time of the year. The first thing is Hanami culture. And this is basically like everyone goes out and chases the cherry blossoms and sets up a picnic or tarps and just spends the day out in nature looking at the beautiful flowers. So because of this, you're gonna wanna make sure that you are getting to these spots that are like parks or sit down outdoor locations early because people will set up their picnic area and clean their space fairly early on. So Hanami actually means flower viewing, and it's based in an old Japanese tradition of enjoying the fleeting nature of the flowers since they are only there for a couple of days to a couple of weeks. Next up, during cherry blossom season, there are some fun seasonal treats. So whenever you're out exploring Japan during cherry blossom season, there's a lot of like fun themed beverages, themed food. I remember when we were there were like special Starbucks cherry blossom drinks, McDonald's cherry blossom menu items. So it might just be with the big chains, but a lot of also small businesses do adapt their menu to celebrate Sakura season. There's also lots of pop-up food festivals that you can go and visit using cherry blossom recipes. And we highly recommend this. The ones that we did go to were delicious. And lastly, you do want to know before you go some etiquette tips when it comes to visiting the cherry blossoms. Obviously, we want to be very respectful of the flowers. Don't pick them when you are going. Just take photos, leave the flowers there for everyone to enjoy. Basically, just leave no trace and enjoy nature as respectfully as possible. And if you go out picnicking, make sure to pick up after yourself. That is it for this cherry blossom guide to Japan. We hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like and subscribe. And if you guys are planning on chasing the cherry blossoms this year, best of luck with the conditions. And don't forget to use our code down below to get 50% off all of Kluke's cherry blossoms festivities and tours. And with that, we'll see you back next week with another adventure.